All right. So, welcome everyone to another installment of Pretty Owl Poetry's online reading series. Tonight we have issue 2 contributor Joanna Valente joining us. And hi, Joanna.
Hey.
And I'm going to read Joanna's bio by way of introduction. Joanna is a human who received her MFA in writing at Sarah Lawrence College. She is the author of Sirs and Madams, Aldrich Press, 2014. Some of her work appears in the Paris American, The Destroyer, the Atlas Review, Bailiff Press, and others. In 2011, she received the American Society of Poets Prize. She founded and currently edits Yes Poetry. She is also a copy editor and staff writer for Luna Luna magazine. And she resides in Brooklyn, New York. All right. Joanna, thank you for being with us tonight.
Oh, no problem. It's all my pleasure.
We're going to go ahead and mute our microphones, and then whenever you're ready, you can start reading.
Okay, perfect. I'm ready. Okay, so my first poem is titled God of Internet. Clearly, I'm obsessed with the internet. In the beginning, we were programmed with light, and light we turned our backs upon. And night defaulted so darkness curls toward us, unthinking as a falling body embracing pavement. It is impossible for a child to come out of us. There's nothing for it outside but endless data, growing like a lump inside a woman's breast, which are too beautiful to die. So we stuff and mount them on Google, a museum of graves avoiding the gods who don't know the color of waves surfing the web. In an effort to stay on Earth, we all become .coms in time. Life is easier when it's pixelated. There is nowhere to stand huddled near the gravestones of human history. Ask Chrome's search, who's your daddy? And the next poem, also published by Pretty Owl Poetry, is titled Stepmother. And this poem is part of a collection where I'm just doing a bunch of interview poems, sort of set in one family. What do you own? The world is between my legs. When are you happy? Who I am when I am not myself. Why did you marry? Why would anyone jog on this road? It's asking to die. What has aged you? Everyone reciting someone else's wedding vows. Describe your 20s. Parties celebrating watered down versions of God. I'll read, I guess, 3 more shortish poems. We'll see how I feel. I'm always very much about the moment with poetry readings, but the next one I'll read is another God poem, as I like to call it. It's called God of Light Meets God of Water, which was actually recently published in the latest issue of The Destroyer, which you guys should definitely check out. Tell me, in your cast-off sweater, a world of waves thriving around your skull, where 2 bodies like ours will be beyond this room, darkened with air. Teach me dismemberment, so I can unscrew my lungs, drop a cell of yours inside, so mine can grow as you. Our bodies, two, searching as one, crookedly, breathless, breathing. You pointed out the full moon, dangerous and gleaming swans, neck in neck. Do not share me. Red soaking feathers down bellies, a match lighting the rear of their throats. Out comes a moan, then vomiting, constellation's seed. Don't believe me, just watch. Alone in the hall, crescent headlights. So the next one I'll read is actually from my forthcoming book. This one is titled Songbird. Translate how fond a gas station attendant loves the smell of oil to a chocolatier discovering all the cocoa in the world is gone. Is it a goodbye or the first embrace? I promised to find a train that would meet you halfway. A title to start a poem. Each break causes your mouth to mute. Once I thought to drown out your song with beeswax. Now there's only your sighing jaw. I think I'll read one more, and that will be When They Were Lonely, which is another poem, part of Sirs and Madams, which is my forthcoming book. There are freckles running into his cheeks from his nose, a topography map of Brooklyn. He asks for a typewriter on his birthday, says he forgot how to use his hands. Tessa wants her hands to find his intestines, twist until drained of her kind of loneliness, a Winslow Homer loneliness. It's a cliche to yearn for freedom in America. He says, at my job I have many bosses. She says she loves men who are dead. They are the men who love the most. It was then he became afraid of her. That's it. Thank you for having me read. It's so much fun and weird reading on the internet.
Thank you for being with us. That was great.
Oh, thank you.
We're going to ask you a couple of questions if you're up for it.
Yeah, of course I love questions. Especially when it involves poetry.
So I'm really glad you read God. You read The God of Light poem, right? That was from the Destroyer, correct? Okay.
Yes.
Because I was like hunting around on your website and was thinking about like what I could talk to you about, and I was interested in the way that one looks because that one uses semicolons throughout.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of curious about the relationship between the punctuation and like in that poem specifically, sort of like the breakdown of language.
Yes.
And if you could like maybe talk about that, or maybe about how if the punctuation is all connected to the God in the poems, which I'm really intrigued by the God in the poems.
Sure, of course. That's a really great question, actually. So that poem is kind of interesting in the sense I use the semicolons for a few different reasons. One of them is for musicality because I wanted the lines to be longer as opposed to them being shorter, but I wanted to really create a breath. And I could have used slashes, which are like this sort of typical thing, or dashes, which I also love, but I decided to do the semicolon because I kind of wanted each phrase to almost be like they're their own sentences.
Mhm.
Of course, grammatically speaking, they're not actually their own sentences, but since this is poetry, we can kind of do what we want a little bit.
Totally, totally do what you want.
Exactly. So I was doing it for that. I really wanted the breadth, and I really wanted to kind of move the poem along without it really being about the line breaks, which I usually do. I usually like the line breaks to kind of force the momentum of the poem, but this time I kind of wanted to do the opposite. I
Cool.
also used the semicolon in particular with this one because it is like a very strange poem that I'm trying to base in the images, and they're sort of weird images of these swans like neck and neck, and like you're not really sure if they're like having sex with each other or if they're like murdering each other, or like maybe they're doing both. So I was kind of looking at them as though they were those snakes that like bite each other at the tail, but swans. So it's
Nice.
like this, I guess, sort of like these swans who are in love with each other, but sort of despise each other as like all sort of like lovers do.
Hmm.
So I wanted to really get into that and kind of break up the language in a really sort of dysfunctional way, if that makes sense, and deconstruct it.
Right.
And I think because it's also a God poem, as I like to say, I did that as well because it's like where is like the humans and where is God, and I'm kind of trying to break it up in such a way where you almost don't know because it doesn't matter, I think, at this point anymore. So I think I was also in that sense trying to marry both of those forces. Whether or not that works, that's something else, but
That's cool.
it
How
was
big is
fun.
your series now? Like, is this like I'm assuming the God poems are like
Mhm.
all series? Like,
Definitely, yeah.
are you working towards a chapbook, or is it just kind of like a few poems at this point?
It's definitely, hopefully, going to be an actual entire collection. I think at this point I have yet to like totally update the whole thing, but I think I should have like 35 to 40 poems. So technically it is long enough to be a full length, but I'm definitely not done with it at this point. I have like a lot more poems that I could write about this, but yeah, that's definitely like been a I guess I've been working on it for about a year now
Oh,
at this point.
that's awesome. Um, so the other poem that you, well, that one wasn't published in Pretty Owl, but in Stepmother, which is in Pretty Owl,
Yes.
you kind of briefly talked about this too when you're introducing
Mhm.
it about the Q&A format that you have going on.
Yes.
And I was kind of curious if like there was anything in particular that inspired that form, or if that was
Mhm.
just like, because to me it sort of felt like it was in response to maybe something very specific that you saw, but I don't know, maybe I'm just like assuming that. So I was just curious where that kind of what that was born out of.
Kind of two things. Part of it was born out of the fact that I just love reading interviews. Like that's kind of what I do on my downtime at work. I'm just like always going to read things. And I feel like for me, and I think I can speak for a lot of people when I say this, is like we like the instant gratification that an interview gives. And it's kind of a voyeuristic thing as well. Like we like seeing into the minds of someone else, and usually that person is someone that we idolize to some respect or hate. It could go kind of either way. So I think I was at once interested with the interview format because of that. I think part of it too is that since I live in New York City, I'm always surrounded by people, and I'm always interested like in their stories, and I wish I could interview them all. And I was kind of also like inspired by Humans of New York, which is kind of a funny thing.
Yeah.
But like Humans of New York is like really, really optimistic sometimes. Like I feel like even when he gets really depressing answers, there's always that underlying feeling of like these people are great and we're all beautiful. And I kind of wanted to do the same thing, but not feel like we're all beautiful or that we all feel that way.
Right.
Not that I don't think that's the case, but I think a lot of us feel discouraged. And I don't want to sugarcoat that, if that makes sense. I kind of just want to have these interviews be people's answers as though no one else would ever read them. I just want them to be as honest as possible.
Cool. Um, Rose or Gordon, do you want to jump in at all?
Sure. Um, uh, yeah, I, reading through, God of the Internet, you say
Yes,
the one line, um, we will all become .coms.
yes.
So you have successfully become a .com. Am I correct?
I guess so. I don't know how I feel about it.
You're a Tumblr, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, tumbleweeds in space.
All right. Well, so is is there an autobiographical side to these God poems? Because on one hand, you're working with these heady ideas such as God and stuff
Yeah,
like
of
that, but you don't
course.
really go off into talking about mythology or talking about
Yeah.
that like heady theology that you'd have to have pre-read something in order to. So
Mhm.
it seems almost like it's human and innate. And I was wondering, is there the personal aspect of these poems about God?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think everything I write to some extent is always going to be personal. And I think I would argue that for everybody that would be the case. I think for me, I definitely don't try to hide it by any means. I think with these God poems, and maybe this is not so apparent in the God of Internet poem, I wrote another God poem about like two gods getting divorced. And I would say that one definitely was more about me. I've never been divorced, but like I've lived with like a former
Okay.
boyfriend and it almost felt like getting divorced. So I definitely drew a lot from my life about that. And even in the God of Internet poem, kind of like the insecurity of what it is to like want to last, I think, for a long time or not want to last for a long time and like feeling as though you're not communicating well enough to connect with someone else. I was kind of, I guess, using all of these emotions and springboarding them on to a God figure because I almost feel like they have to feel something in this universe that I created. Like they're very human, kind of like the Greek gods. Like they feel emotion.
Hmm. That I actually was thinking Greek gods while you're talking about it because you have some gods getting divorced. You have god of light and god of water have something going on. Do the god of light and the god of internet have a thing? Because starts off on the internet that we're all born out of light, and then you mentioned god of light later. I didn't know if like
They might. I haven't written it yet, but now like I feel like I totally should.
oh,
God
okay.
of Lightning and God of Thunder have a thing. They're the ones getting divorced.
Oh, ooh,
Yeah.
okay.
I should write like God of like internet porn or something like that. I'm not sure how that would come out yet.
They're
I should say
plenty.
that I am like obsessed with Greek mythology, so it's not surprising that this is kind of like working itself into it.
Okay. Yeah. Hmm. I suppose my next question, moving kind of away from the mythological aspect
Mhm.
and more into the personal everyday life, you have endless data that things are being born or not being born into. You
Mhm.
kind of have like this cyberpunkish, cybernetic, post-apocalyptic view of the world through the internet poem that I kind of picked up on. I felt dark to say the least. With as you said, perhaps inspired by the humans of New York, with always a silver lining of hope and such.
Mhm.
And I've asked this question to someone before, but I want to ask it again. When you're putting a poem onto the internet, you put some of your own poetry onto your Tumblr website, you
Mhm.
submit to other online magazines and stuff
Yes.
like that. Uh, What distinguishes, do you think, a poem that you put online versus any other passage of text that you would throw online? A blurb about yourself, a text message maybe that you would even send, or an instant message on Google or whatnot. What do you think goes into the pieces of poetry that separate them just from your everyday typing communication?
That's an interesting question because, like, on one hand, I definitely think there's a difference in the sense, like, obviously, I'm really working on my poems and they took a lot of like time and energy. Whereas, like, I can't lie and say like my G chats are like these eloquent. things. Like a lot of times I misspell, and I'm like at work, and I'm like, oh, I gotta type this really fast before someone comes over. I would say it's like all about in the end communication, and I think that's why like I do have such like a sort of heavy online presence because I'm about connecting to different people. Conversely, though, it's interesting because it's like I used to have a live journal, like back in the days when live journal was a thing. And I think that was like a good example of like the weirdness that is writing on the internet. Because it's like on one hand I would take it super seriously. I was also like 13, so I took everything seriously. But on the other hand, by no means, I don't even think at the time I thought like any of it was publishable. I think at this point, like what I tend to publish or put on my personal website, they've always been published poems, so like I'll never just put a random poem up there. So I think for me, I look at it as like my online portfolio. So it's like kind of this weird like version of myself via website. I would say though otherwise for me I kind of hope that like text messages or like G chats or whatever Facebook comments are kind of like phone calls. I'm not really sure like what to consider that. But it's like more I guess personal, if that makes sense. I never really like comment on something that I don't care about, if that makes sense.
Right. Right. Yes. Well, that answer my question. Then that's awesome. I mean I think I'm just trying to figure that out myself, but I'm too. Yeah, I recently found my old Zanga. It was horrible, but I had Walt Whitman poems on it. Oh God, yeah.
That's pretty great, though.
Yeah.
That's better than Dead Journal. I mean, Dead Journal's kind of a hilarious thing that happened, too. It's like the goth version of everything.
Of Live Journal? Oh, I never heard of that.
See, this is how much of a nerd that I am.
Yeah, I think I should have found that. I think I had my like two favorite bands listed as like Radiohead and Tool, so it was pretty gothy. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like all about The Cure and like Depeche Mode at that age, so I was just like writing about why no boys liked me, pretty much.
Rose.
Well, yeah. You actually touched upon some of the questions I had, Gordon, so that was cool. We were on a similar wavelength. So the one
That's
question,
awesome.
yeah, I love that. I love the internet poem. I just think I remember years ago when I would read poems or stories where it would talk about the internet. It was frustrating because I don't think we were at a point yet where we could talk about it. And it's sort of, and I feel like you did a really good job with that in your poem. So I hope there's more internet poems coming soon from you.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. I'll keep you guys in the loop with them.
Awesome. Great. So I was curious kind of about your outside projects. And I wondered if you could tell us more about Luna Luna Magazine and Yes Poetry.
Yeah, of course. So, Yes Poetry, I started by myself like 4.5 years ago, which seems like a real long time. I was still an undergrad in college, so it's like for whatever reason really ambitious and was like, I really want to start this magazine. So I started it in like my dorm room because I was classy, and I kind of just like went from there. Like I registered it on like Poets and Writers and like New Pages and Duotrope and all of those places. And submissions just kept coming in. It was kind of weird for me, to be honest, because a lot of times like random college professors from like places like in the Midwest or wherever would like send me things, and I was like, wow, I'm an undergrad, this is such a strange thing. And it just kind of grew. Like initially I did it monthly, but then that got crazy and I had to do it quarterly just because I obviously don't get paid for it, and I have a full-time job now, so it's like my schedule is much different. Mm-hmm. But I really love it now because I feel like it's finally, after 4 years, like found a voice. I do like a monthly poet feature, and then I do like every few months the quarterly issue, which only features 3 poets, and I interview each poet. And I feel like that way, like I'm really getting to know the poets, and I'm letting the readers kind of have a more interactive vibe with them. And I think for me, for the magazine, I never wanted it to be a pretentious poetry magazine because I already felt like there were too many out there, and I really just wanted to put poetry out that I thought was good. It doesn't even necessarily always have to be my aesthetic. I try to be unbiased. I don't know if that's like a very naive approach, but I think I just want it to be a happy place for poetry, which is kind of weird because before I was saying how I'm kind of cynical, but I'm kind of a weird mix of both. In terms of Luna Luna, that's like a crazy, huge, amazing thing that's happening right now. So right now, Lisa Marie Basile is the one that started it. And she and I are really good friends, and she's amazing, and she just had this random idea last summer that she wanted to start this feminist magazine that also was kind of feminism for like women who are artists, writers, whoever. They don't have to be, but it's kind of like this weird like goth girl niche. And now I'm one of the managing editors, and I do a weekly column of my own. And with that, it's funny. I didn't actually intend for it to become like this huge project. I initially just sent her an article that I just wanted to be published regarding my sexual assault that unfortunately happened to me in college. And I just felt like that would be the perfect place for that because it felt like it was this run by someone that I knew and like cared about. But then for whatever reason, I just became more and more involved. And it's been great, honestly, because before that, I wasn't really writing that much prose. I was really just writing poetry. So now, like, within this year, I've been writing a lot more essays and, like, nonfiction. So that's been cool because I'm, like, finally figuring out I can actually write sentences and they make sense. And I also like don't just write poetry now, which I think makes my poetry better because I'm a lot more introspective in ways that my poetry wasn't maybe affording me to be.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my big long spiel about that.
No, that was great. I hadn't known about that until you submitted, and then I started like reading her articles. I was like, this is awesome, this publication. So
Yeah,
look
it's
forward to
great because there's a lot of different voices. It's not just like one specific thing.
right.
I'm also a big fan, I just have to put that out there, of Luna Luna. I read all the stuff all the time, basically.
That's awesome. That's so great to hear. Because it actually happened to me at the New York City Poetry Festival 2 days ago. This girl just randomly came up to me and was just like, "This is awesome. I love like the magazine and everything you guys do." And it was like such a heartwarming experience because I was like, "Wow, this is crazy." Like that people are beginning to like know about it and read it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How was that, by the way? The festival?
It was a lot of fun. I mean, I read on Saturday, so it was really like nice. I didn't have to worry about work. A lot of Luna Luna people were actually ironically there, and a lot of like random friends of mine like showed up, which was really nice. There was also goats, I should say, because Governor's Island. Apparently, I didn't know this, and I've been living in New York my entire life. Has like this weird like compost farm with like chickens and goats and a lot of random things going on like all year. This wasn't even just for the festival. So I kind of took like a 2-hour detour and like petted goats for a while, which was really great to be honest.
And unexpected, I bet.
Yeah, it was really funny because like they were super friendly goats too. Like they like to be hugged. So that was fun. But the poetry also was pretty great, I should say. There was a lot of people who came out, which was good. And it didn't rain. We were a little bit nervous. It only rained for like 5 minutes.
Oh, good. Those are the only questions I had for the night.
All right. Joanna, do you want to put in a last-minute plug for your book that's coming out?
Sure. I'll definitely. So yeah, I have my first full-length poetry book coming out from Aldrich Press in December of this year. So once that comes out, I'll definitely let everyone know, and it'll be available through Amazon. So it's very easy for anybody to buy.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining us. That
Oh, no
was
problem.
really enjoyed having you.
Oh, thank you. No, it was so great. I'm glad I got to talk to you guys.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.